1930s. Look into your crystal ball, both of you, and tell us what's in store for Los Angeles as a city, and what your friends are saying about it, and more importantly, what you're saying about it.
Well, look, these are tough times. This is the worst situation since the Great Depression. In fact, some people are saying it's even worse. Why? We are dropping faster, and consumer confidence is sinking more rapidly. Unemployment is growing more rapidly than it did. I think we're going to get out. Long term, this is a great country and a great city. Over the short term, we've got big problems. We've got big problems. We've got to restore confidence. Will the stimulus package work? Will all the other things that's happening in the federal government really work? We really don't know. I think it's going to have some effect. We've got to have home prices bottom out, which they haven't yet. We've got to make homes more affordable, which means lower prices, but more importantly, much lower interest rates. The price of a home is not what it costs. It's what your monthly payment is. So I think if we do a number of things and stabilize housing and also look at our future, what's our future here? To me, it's biotech. We've got great universities, whether it's Caltech, USC, UCLA, and we've got people graduating to create all these new businesses. We've got to do that here in Los Angeles. We've got to do more to get cultural tourism. We've got great museums, a great symphony hall, a great opera, more theatrical productions in New York or London, but yet people don't come here the way they go to New York, Paris, or London. And that's going to change, and that'll help our economy.
Mr. Reardon, are you worried? I mean, really worried?
You have to be really worried, but I'm with Eli. I think in the long run, I have a lot of confidence. We saw the Northridge earthquake, where before that, L.A. was in the dumps. People had lost their confidence. The national media was against L.A. All of a sudden, the people from Los Angeles got up, and they helped their neighbor. They got their businesses going, and it created a tremendous confidence in the city that we can do anything. And you look at Los Angeles, and we have what it takes to be the city of the future. We have the most foreign trade of any place in the world. 42% of American foreign trade comes through the Los Angeles port and the airports. And we have the movie industry. We're the leaders in the fashion industry. We have the most manufacturing companies in the country. They're small, they're medium companies who really make a big difference for LA than the giant corporations. So I have a lot of confidence in the future, but in the short run, we've got to really stop the money paid by government, overpaying for everything by government, and get restructured to do things right. We're going to have pension plans. The pensions paid for people are going to be 40% of their payroll in two to 3 years, and so we're headed for some big problems. But I have great confidence in the people of Los Angeles.
We moved here from San Francisco just as the Rodney King incident happened, and you came along with your business leadership at a time when LA was really in a really rough place. I mean, the civil unrest shook everyone. It shook everyone to their core. What do you see now as far as with what's happening? Do we have any worry about civil unrest now, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I'll tell you, I was back at the inauguration, and I should say I'm very proud. My daughter's picture and mine were on the front page of the LA Times and the New York Times the day after the inauguration, along with 500,000 other people. But, but I just felt a new camaraderie back there between African Americans and whites. I mean, it was like it's a new country, that we both had confidence in the other, and the blacks no longer felt like victims. The whites were no longer afraid of blacks, but we just became one country. And
Latinos, because that's
and the Latinos.
California.
I mean, well, the Latinos have been my biggest support when I ran for mayor, and the same way with Latinos. I never saw anybody arguing with anybody back there, even though you're getting pushed around by big crowds. So I think our country has a long ways to go, and it's too bad this meltdown happened at the time it did, but if you look back, it was going to happen someday.
You're both self-made success stories in America. You from rags to riches out of Michigan as well. But what do you tell a person who's lost their job? What is the formula or suggestion that if you could put your arm around them and say, this is what you need to do, what do you say?
Well, I think is don't lose your confidence. I mean, don't allow yourself to be depressed. Get up and do anything that you have to do, even if it's a lowly job. Get up and do it better than anybody ever do it before. And you will eventually be coming back to where you were or better. But it's not something you should ever give up on. Teddy Roosevelt said, the world doesn't belong to the critic. It belongs to the person who trips, falls, gets bloodied, and gets up and keeps going.
When was the doubt in your life?
I'm not one that ever had a great deal of doubt. I'm very critical of myself and everything we do, but I've always believed that even if you had setbacks, you overcome them, you move forward, you have new ideas, new dreams, you regroup and keep going. And whether it's in the world of commerce or the world of philanthropy, what we do in education reform is not exactly making everyone happy, because there are a lot of people that want to maintain the status quo. And every now and then I'm hung in effigy by some of these adult interests that don't want to see dramatic change. So you just keep going. You do what's right. You have to have a determination to win in whatever you're doing. And every now and then you lose one or two. But no one bets 1,000 in anything we do.
I have a great quote. I said, only a mediocre person never makes a mistake.
Mr. Broad, you've been married for over 50 years to Edith Broad.
That's true.
You got married when you were 18.
54 years. No, she was 18. I was 21. Brilliant.
How has your marriage contributed to your success?
Oh, I think it's a foundation of steadiness. I mean, I may do all of these things outside of the home and outside of our marriage and our ups and downs, but I've got a wonderful wife. She's very steady, very supportive, and we collaborate on a lot of things, especially in the arts, some of the educational endeavors and the like.
Mr. Reardon, who do you lean on if in tough times?
Who do I lean on?
Yeah.
Eli Broad. But who do I lean on? I think Carl McKenzie's been my partner for years. I lean on, and Lloyd Torgerson, who's my pastor at St. Monica's Church. And I think there's a different person in a different situation, because for all of us, we do make mistakes. And we do get a little depressed at times, but the bottom line is don't let it get you down. Just get over it and get going. And sometimes there are people like Eli and others who will help me do that.
Are we likely to see Richard Reardon in the back pew of St. Monica's praying?
Yeah, you will if you go at like 6 o'clock on a weekday morning.
Praying for inspiration. Well, you certainly have had great success in your life, in your business life, and your personal life, but also great sadness. I really want to know what gets you up despite the losses you've had in your personal life, the courage that you reach into and find.
Well, I
go
lost
forward.
my son scuba diving, and my daughter had a daughter that had a heart attack, and as anybody's been through it knows, it's like having a sledgehammer hit over your head, and it takes a lot out of you. But then you have to stop and say, there are other people that rely on you, your children, others that rely on you, and you can't give up. And since then, what I do is I have a conversation with my children who died, and if I'm up to give a speech and I don't feel too comfortable, I look up in the sky and I see one of them laughing at me, and I start giving the speech.
And the speech is?
To never let anything get you down, to keep going, that people are behind you. People want you to succeed. So you should never lose your confidence, but you should be realistic about yourself. And I said earlier, and empower other people. It's amazing if you can surround yourself with the people that Eli has surrounded himself with and that I have. There's no way that you won't be successful.
We want to know more about the minutiae, though, the starts and stops as you progressed. How you began, were there disappointments, who funded you, who was your friend, who wasn't your friend?
I was actually born in New York City, but my parents moved when I was 6 years of age to Detroit at the beginning of World War II, without my consent, I might add. Now, I went through Detroit public schools. I went to land-grant university. I think the work ethic in Michigan, in the Midwest, is very different than what you find, and values are very different than what you find on this coast or the East Coast. And I think that gave me a great foundation. Now, how did I start? I started as a young CPA. I was going to be a lawyer, but I said, wait a minute, can I really spend 5, 6 years going to college? And the answer, I decided I couldn't do that. So I became a CPA, and that lasted about 2 years. And I had clients that were making lots of money building homes. And I was earning $67.40 a week after taxes. And I said, you know, I could do that. So I found somebody named Don Kaufman, and we started Kaufman & Broad. Building company was the first name, in suburbs of Detroit. I was 23 years of age. Then it grew very rapidly. We went public when I was 28 years of age, then listed on New York Stock Exchange, a first in our industry.
Was that luck, or was it?
I think it was determination. I think it was a lot of innovation. We built homes that were very different. No one had built homes without basements in Detroit at the time. We were the first really to do that. And then we came to California because we wanted better markets. Several years after we started, we built townhouses for the first time in Huntington Beach. We're always looking for innovation and doing things differently, and always challenging the status quo, and always asking questions. And along the way, I've been blessed to get a lot of great people around me. People that succeeded me at KB Home, people that succeeded me at Sun America. And it's always been, you know, a challenge. And we'd reach one plateau and everyone would say, that's great. And I'd say, that's nice, but where do we go from here? And
well, I can tell you what, I didn't mention one other thing. I mentioned empowerment, but having a relentless pursuit of closing, of making things happen, and that describes Eli. Eli never opens his mouth with a new idea unless he's going to implement it right after.
Whenever we succeed and I'm not happy and I want to move on to something greater, people say, your problem is you're a sore winner.
But it's a strong drive. It's a lot of work ethic. It's getting up every morning, and everybody gets up every morning and they get dressed and they get ready to take on the world. What would your advice be to people in LA, your average working person? What do you get up and say to yourself every morning so that you get to one day be Eli Broad and Richard Riordan?
Well, one thing you can say is have courage every day. Have the courage to get up, have the courage to get in your car, have the courage to get to work, have something to do by 8:30 or 9 every day, and just make things happen. And talking to young students, like African American students, they say, will I be discriminated against? I said, I don't know. You may get some jobs because you're African American, and some jobs you may be discriminated against. But one thing I'll guarantee you, if you work hard, get to work on time, work hard, no matter what the job is, within 5 years you'll be where you deserve.
I started with you, Mr. Broad. I'm going to end with Mr. Riordan. The rumor is circulating that you won't play golf with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Is that true?
I don't know what people are thinking about. Would you play golf with somebody who cheats on their score in almost every hole?
No.
Would you play golf with somebody if the ball goes into the woods, it mysteriously ends up in the middle of the fairway? Would you?
Absolutely not.
Well, neither will Arnold.
That's very good, Jack.
The
Rick Riordan never misses a beat, I'll tell you. You can't come away from this interview without thinking about the value of friendship and partnership.
Building businesses and building partnerships does frame the skyline of our lives.
Here in L.A., like the rest of the nation, we continue to watch and wait and try to do our best each day to support one another on this business roller coaster.
We hope you will take something away from this historic interview with Eli Broad and Richard Riordan.
Indeed, something that will affect your outlook on work or your search for a job in a more positive way. Thanks for being with us on LA Business Today.
Moving is so much of who we are. It's easy to take it for granted. Multiple sclerosis stops people from moving. We exist to make sure it doesn't. The National Multiple Sclerosis Society is a collective of passionate individuals united by a common goal to address the challenges of each person whose life is affected by MS. We believe that moving is not just something you can or can't do, but rather is who you are. That if you are alive, you move along with, because of, and in spite of the great big turning world. Join the movement, the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, at nationalmssociety.org.
LA City View Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ad Hoc Committee for Economic Recovery and Reinvestment. Today is the 19th of February, on Friday, 2010, and we're here in the John Ferraro Council Chambers. We have an astounding attendance record this morning. The chairman is here and awake and ready to work. I'm sure others are there. I just have no peripheral vision right now. But without that, we will go forward and start, and hopefully the other council members will be joining us shortly. If we can get the general rundown.
Good morning. Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations in the Mayor's Office. Wednesday, February 17th, marked the one-year anniversary of the passage of ARA, and pleased to report that as of the completion of the first year, that we've received nearly $597 million in ARA competitive and formula and discretionary funding as a result of the program. That also marked, the one-year anniversary also marked the deadline for the announcement of grants that had been listed in ARA of different programs. And as a result of that, the Secretary of Transportation announced the release of the TIGER, which is Transportation Infrastructure Generating Economic Recovery, $1.5 billion of discretionary funding. These were for major infrastructure projects, a minimum of $20 million each, with no state getting more than $300 million.
No matter what our population or size.
Right. We had two projects that had been provided, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how that came about, with $81 million worth of funding. Two projects at the port related to goods movement, basically rail projects. California received $130 million for 4 projects, 2 of those in Northern California, 2 in Southern California. Our 2 projects were not included in that. One of those projects, Doyle Drive Replacement Project, a $46 million project, was basically a road that connects through the Presidio in San Francisco to the Golden Gate Bridge. Coincidentally, it happens to be in Speaker Pelosi's congressional district. The other is a Northern California one, was called California Green Trade Corridor. It's a marine highway that would connect help connect the port of Oakland to the ports of Stockton and the ports of West Sacramento for $69.3 million. The one in Southern California was Otay Mesa Port of Entry. This was a road to link I-805 with a new Interstate 905 to help with truck traffic from the Mexican border, and that was $20.2 million. And the last one is called Colton Crossing, which was to eliminate at-grade railroad crossings for the Union Pacific and Burlington Northern Santa Fe railroads through the city of Colton. At $33.8 million were awarded, and that total project is $198 million. Let me mention a little bit about how we came up with the projects that we did here. Within Southern California, within this area, there is a regional consensus group made up of the 5 county transportation authorities, the Port of Long Beach, the Port of Los Angeles, and the Alameda Corridor Transportation Authority. Out of that group, they developed a list of projects. Actually, they came up with almost $386 million worth of projects, so more than even what the state would do. The governor had set up a peer review group to analyze projects throughout the state, and we had some representation from the regional group. The Port of Los Angeles, for one, the Port of Long Beach were represented on that regional or that peer review group. However, when it came down to it, they were never able to develop a consensus and put forward a statewide package. So basically, each of the areas in the state submitted their projects to the secretary. However, the project for Colton Crossing was one that was submitted by Caltrans on behalf of the Union Pacific Railroad, and it was submitted outside of this process. So it was really unknown to anyone that they had done this. And there are certain problems that are as a result of that. One is that there is state legislation that was passed that requires that there needs to be a baseline agreement between the parties as to how to proceed by March of 2010. And if that agreement is not in place, the state the state funding for that project, which is about $97 million, can be reprogrammed back to the regional group, and the regional group has already voted that they want to use that money for positive train control. My best estimate from talking to people is that this baseline agreement will not be able to be put in place by March of 2010. So the question is, will the California Transportation Commission in March at their meeting vote to rescind the money from this project? If they do so, that will pretty much sort of doom this particular project and the $33.8 million of federal money. We could, at that point, ask that money also be reprogrammed for positive train control, because the regional group had submitted a project, I think, for, I forget exactly how much money it was, but for positive train control to be able to do that. So Secretary LaHood is in town today, and the mayor will be having a meeting with him, and hopefully this is one of the issues that we want to be able to raise with him. And there may be more questions. It's a sort of a complicated subject, but I'll be happy to answer those.
Is there any chance that the 33.8 would be used for something besides a positive train control, like our port?
Well, the thing we want to be careful is that if, in fact, the project is not able to be a feasible project, that the Secretary doesn't just take the money and put it somewhere else. We would like to make an argument that there's still a need for that money to be spent here, and we've got good projects. Right. The other issue is that in the current FY10 budget, there's $600 million of funding available for a continuation of these kinds of, they're not really calling it Tiger 2, but there's money available for that. The question is whether one of our strategy would be, should we work with the Appropriations Committee to see if, one, we could either designate that money be spent on projects that were already submitted to the Secretary before. The Secretary received $57 billion worth of funding projects for this $1.5 billion of funding that there was. So, but that could be one stipulation, or we could even try and do something even further to see if we could have that money reprogrammed to Southern California.
Okay.
Councilman Parks raised a question the last time we met regarding a letter that he had received from Senator Boxer on a subject called TANF-EFC, which TANF stands for Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. It's the new acronym for the old AFDC program, Aid to Families with Dependent Children. And the EFC stands for the Emergency Contingency Funds. Currently, in each year, the budget provides $2 billion available to states that are having severe problems with dependency, and allowing them to add additional funds to that. And that gets used by about 21 states, and that money is pretty much tapped out every year. But in ARA, there was an additional $5 billion that was put in. Oh, here's Mr. Parks now. So there's additional $5 billion that was put into the to TANF for the Emergency Contingency Fund. And what this would allow would be states to be able to use additional funding over and above what their baseline funding had been in previous fiscal years, that 80% of that money could go for 3 specific programs, and those programs were basic assistance, non-recurrent short-term benefits, and subsidized employment programs. Unfortunately, the states have not been able to, because of, I guess, paperwork problems and other kinds of things getting it set up, the states have really not been able to fully utilize the $5 billion that's available, and this program is to expire at the end of this fiscal year. So what Senator Boxer was writing to Councilman Parks about was asking for support to legislation which would extend the $5 billion program for an additional year. And while this money comes to the states, it doesn't come to us directly. It comes to the states, and the states and then in turn provide it to the counties. It will be something that would be of benefit to the residents of the city and the county. And so we would be fully in support of supporting Senator Boxer's efforts to get an extension on the TANF-EFC. We can do it in the form of a council resolution and or a letter from the mayor. Okay. And we'd be happy to work with you in the CLA's office on getting that drafted. Wanted to also mention that I think at the last meeting I passed out a list of the surface transportation programs under ARA, the street resurfacing projects, and Councilman Parks had some additional questions about that, as did Councilman Alarcon. And our Bureau of Street Services actually provided to each of your offices that you should have, and the CLA's office will be able to provide in hard copy a listing not of the specific streets, the number of miles that are created for each of those streets, not only for the ARA projects, but also for the streets with gas tax funding and with Prop C funding. And we're giving you a listing by your council district and for each council district, as well as a citywide listing of all of those, so you'll be able to see what those, see what projects are being paid for. And the last two things I wanted to mention was today you'll be dealing with the issue of weatherization. This is a $5 billion national program that allows for the retrofitting of low-income individuals, 120% of poverty, for up to $6,500 to basically weatherize homes for energy savings. Under this program, LA County is slated to receive $39 million. Now, this is an ongoing program in which the money goes from the federal government to the states, and the states administer this program. And as I said, this is a program that has been in existence for some time. And within the state of California, there are 44 what they call local service providers, which are nonprofit organizations that actually do this weatherization work. They have... in Los Angeles County, there are 3 local service providers, and when the money came out, was given out for the $39 million, this represented about 50 times the amount of annual money that these service providers would be able to get. 2 of the 3 service providers in Los Angeles County, after looking at this, indicated that they were unwilling to take this on. It was just too big of a burden to them, and gave the money back to the state. And at the time that when the state made this decision to continue to use the local service providers, we had written to the state and said we didn't think this was a great idea, that you ought to open this process up to more local governments to be able to do this. And so as a result of that, we've been approached by the state of California, the Community Services and Development Department, to run the program, that the money that was given back that's in the city of Los Angeles. So today you're going to be hearing a presentation from the Department of Water and Power about our application, which will then be submitted to the state. The state will hold a public hearing, and basically they've agreed, though, that they're going to give us this money. It's $9.2 million that will come to us that will help to retrofit 3,000 households, low-income people, low-income, in Los Angeles City, and it'll also create 77 jobs as a result of that, too. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on this, because it's a little bit different. Normally we would be responding to a grant application or a NOFA, but in fact what happened is the money was turned back in and they've approached us, and now we're applying to the state. The last thing I wanted to talk about was Councilman Alarcon, I believe, has asked some questions about supplantation of ARA funding. And it is basically on a case-by-case basis to look at. However, ARA pretty much follows the federally applicable grant rules when it comes to this issue, and these are contained in the audit guidelines for the Office of Management and Budget, and they generally prohibit supplantation of federal grant money for local money. And by supplantation, what I mean is you have a particular program, you've already obligated the money for it, you get an award of federal money, and you say, I'm going to take that local money that I had budgeted and I'm going to move it over to do something else and use the federal money for that. That's supplantation. However, because of the fact that we're facing layoffs, there is also an effort that we need to make, what's called maintenance of effort, which means that we can, to the level, continue the service level and the positions if we are facing a cut. So it's on a case-by-case basis. Some of the programs are very specific. The justice assistance grants, particularly the cops hiring thing, said no supplantation. You had to establish a baseline, and then all of the ARA funding had to be above whatever the baseline was that you established for new positions. The transportation funding, the street resurfacing and things that we were doing, we started doing those using local workforce. However, Federal Highway has said, no, you can't do that anymore, and for the future, all these projects have to be contracted out. So we cannot use that money to basically continue to use existing workforce. But it is on a case-by-case basis. Community development block grant money, which is probably the most fluid kinds of money that we can use, we could use that money to be able to use it in ways that would be able to maintain existing jobs. So what we'll need to do is look at each particular grant. The other thing is some of these ARA grants have nothing to do with job creation. They're go out and buy this piece of equipment, go out and buy 16 buses. I mean, it might create a job somewhere for somebody who's creating a, building a bus, but it doesn't create a job necessarily, retain a job here in the city. And the last point that I want to continue to hammer on about is the fact that the City of New York City has received $5.5 billion of ARA funding, and yet are still facing closing 20 fire stations and laying off 500 firefighters because they can't use the $5.5 billion of funding to, in fact, save a single firefighter job. And with that, I'll turn over to
Mr. CAO.
Good morning, members of the committee. Bill Kreitz with the CAO's office. I will be brief. I wanted to bring up the fact that the CRA, about 2 weeks ago, we didn't meet in this committee last week, but I wanted to bring up the fact that the CRA was awarded $4.6 million for the state energy program for citywide retrofit a few weeks ago. Their plan, after speaking to them yesterday, was to bring the request, or bring their request for authority to accept that award to you for possibly the March 5th meeting. So you will see that award, that request to accept the award possibly in the next couple weeks. For
retrofit of what now?
They're going to oversee the private retrofit, right? Commercial retrofit.
Yeah. Commercial.
They're going to help businesses and individuals.
The storefronts and things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. With respect to applications, we haven't had any submitted in the last week. Jim did talk about the Tiger grant denials. With respect to report backs, from the last meeting of February 5th, Mr. Alarcon requested a report back by ITA on the BTOP, the LA CAN computers in various public centers. And Mr. Parks had asked also 2 questions that require report back. In speaking with ITA yesterday, their plan is to come back and report to you, both council members, this committee, with their response for next Friday. They're still working with the Recreation Parks, Library, CDD, and of course themselves to establish a meeting and to get the answers to your questions. So those report backs we'll be expecting in time for next Friday's meeting. Excuse me. With respect to all the dashboards, those are on the website, and I just want to remind people that who are listening or watching this on Channel 35 that they can go to recovery.lacity.org and they can see the dashboards that this committee is reviewing as we speak, and additional information on the status of ARA. With respect to grant applications submitted since the last meeting, I think I mentioned that, that's 0. We are now at 149 applications that we've actually submitted, and we've requested almost $1.5 billion. And we so far have 83 awards for $596 million. And there's one application that's due to be submitted to the grantor, and that's the one that Jim just mentioned on the low-income weatherization. I believe that is due on the 26th of February. So that would be just after next week's meeting. And that would conclude my presentation unless there are some questions.
Yeah, a number of questions. One, what do we expect the pace to be? Are we looking at basically a few more applications and that's it? Or I know the end of the announcements was this week, right, but are we still expecting the applications to continue apace?
Oh, yes. As the GAO reported, only 22% of federal funding had been expended as of September 30th. We expect that this year will be a big year for a lot of those. I think what they're really doing, though, is they're trying to decide whether to continue to use the existing funding streams that they've used, the programs, which are very siloed and don't allow for you to use them in ways that best benefited, but gets the money out quickly, or develop more of these sort of sustainable neighborhood, livable community kinds of programs that allow for money to be spent on transportation, electrification, education, all those kinds of things together. But they require writing up those programs, developing the regulations on them, and that delays the money getting out. But so we've sort of seen this void for the last several months where there just really hasn't been any applications, or notices of funding availability sent out.
But there's still a big balance.
Oh yeah, most of the money, like I said, most of the money hasn't been expended yet. So we expect to see.
But is it, if it hasn't been expended, is it nevertheless in process of applications, or they're going to be writing a whole
There's going to be more,
series?
yeah.
Okay.
So the question is, will we do a second round of a lot of these things that we saw before with the same funding streams, or will they develop some new programs?
Gotcha.
And I think part of it is in the same thing that Mr. Alicon raises about the fact is, did these programs really result in job creation? Are they rethinking those? Can we develop other programs that will result in more job creation? Because, like I said, some of these are just go out and buy a bus. That doesn't necessarily create a job.
Right. Of the 22% that has gone out, does that mirror the percentage that we have gotten from grants that we've been awarded, or where are we right now in that percentage?
Yeah.
What have we received?
If you take out the formula grants, as we knew, our batting average is about 25% of all of the money that we've competed for, we've received.
That we competed for and won.
Or competed for, we won. We've only received about $16 million, so yeah.
So that's the question. So we've received about 16 million of if you put the formula stuff in that we've received, if we have, what have we received of the $596,712,908?
Well, realize everything is on a reimbursement basis. So you have to invoice it and then send it, and then you get the money. So that, I don't know if Bill has a particular answer to how much we've invoiced.
Oh, no, I don't have the invoiced amount. No, not yet. We've actually expended about $31 million.
Yeah.
Through December 31st, that is.
And
Right, I remember that at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But it'd be good to know what an updated number of that is. I mean, there's two reasons behind this. One is, as I've been speaking publicly out there, I think the real impact of the stimulus is going to be this year, not last year, because just of the way the pace it's going, which is a pity it took so long, but it's good news for this year. As we look at that too and begin to understand what sort of impact it will have on our local economy and our city jobs and other things that have been raised by members, that's the critical dashboard piece for me, which is what we're spending.
Mr. Chairman, too, I was going to remind you that we're doing the monthly project health reports, and we will have a report for you about the 8th of March that will go through the period of February 28th. So we will have better numbers for you than the ones we had at the conclusion of the calendar year, December 31st.
Okay. And then the last piece, and I know Mr. Alicon probably will speak to it as well, on the, we obviously, we had a very difficult council meeting yesterday. We've had a difficult month and a half facing the downturn in revenues for the city and trying to balance the budget as quickly as possible. We certainly showed some resolve to do that with the mayor for the last 5 weeks, but every job we save is a job saved, a person, a family, a life affected. And where we can, I have two worries. One is obviously some of this money can protect city jobs and has. Some of it may run out, the money. So it doesn't solve the structural problem necessarily. It may be a bridge of funding to keep people in their jobs for another year or two, depending on how long the federal programs continue. But, where there's some that may continue indefinitely, like the energy efficiency block grants, those potentially could, for the foreseeable future, though they don't pay for benefits, we still have that obligation. They may pay for some upfront salaries, but that continues to be a burden on the general fund. Those numbers will be very important. We're trying to be as exact on all of our numbers, whether it's on debt collection, whether it's on revenue projections, whether it's on what eliminations of positions and transfers are. We have to get that budget down to zero. And where we can really have exacting numbers on that, I know it's an additional burden on top of everything else we're doing, but there is no more important job. And this committee really brings together, in my opinion, the two most important jobs we're doing right now in local government. One is balancing our budget. Two is trying to create jobs. where those two can meet together, it's even better. It's an exponentially good thing. But I think we all have felt, and you probably similarly, just a little bit in the dark of, because of how quickly this moves, what is it doing? What's the impact on our budget?
I would also urge again, and this is a request I've made, I think, the last 3 meetings, is that we get the report on the use of maintenance and administrative fees in ARA and see how those can be applied to saving jobs. And we need to address that. It needs to come to you, actually, and so that you can deal with that. But that's one very positive thing that we can be doing right now to help try and save jobs.
What do we feel that administrative number is, and how much time does the CAO need to pull something like that together?
We actually have a draft report.
Okay.
I wrote a draft report a little while ago. It's being reviewed by the front office, so we should have that to you very soon.
I'll speak to the front office for you.
Don't tell them I said
No, of course not. Nobody's listening to us right
Keep it
now.
a secret.
It's just our secret in Channel 35.
Yes.
And a couple of numbers.
Mr. Chairman, I might add, too, our office is working on getting those numbers for you, so we're working with the CLA's office to get those numbers right now for you.
Gotcha. Okay. Members? Yes, sir.
I just want to comment, and I think it is important the effort you're making on the administrative costs, and that we can figure out what that is in the sense of quantitating it. The other thing is that if we're front-loading this money and we don't, and it seems like we ought to tighten that up as to when we invoice, because there's only a finite amount of money to front-load, and every front-load impacts a general fund allocation that is already planned. And so I think this is something that's important, that the tighter that we could make the invoice to the repay, the better off we're going to be. And so that's something that I think that we have to make sure that there's some, particularly as we get close to the fiscal year, into the fiscal year.
I would agree. Out of the $31 million that we reported that we had expended as of the end of the year, $10 million of that was MICLA funds.
No. Okay, but again,
and only $16 million was reimbursement from the federal government.
Yeah, but MICLA funds is something called debt service.
Correct.
So,
right.
And so I think the issue is it's all, coming out of a pot of money. And the issues as far as the R money, and we appreciate that report on the streets, because it gets confusing as to just where and how much is actually going to get done. As at least in my office, we're trying to figure out how we might supplement it with some of our other funds that we have available. And so it's those kinds of things are very, very important as it relates to giving us at least a platform to work from. So I just want to thank you for that. And then that one issue that Senator Boxer, if you could work with Purvey and the CLA, we'd like to get that resolution done as quickly, even though the money goes to the state. It's money that's going to benefit folks that live in the city of LA.
Yes, sir.
As you know, I've been focused on job retention, particularly in the face of potential layoffs for the city of LA. My goal is to protect services. So my questions are always going to be focused around that. When we talk about job retention, are those city jobs?
Yes, sir.
All of them?
The way it's
the 289 that we have are all city jobs?
The majority, Mr. Alarcon, are city jobs. However, on the very first page here of your briefing, I have a little green, I guess you call it a table. It will talk about...
Very first page of what?
Oh, I'm sorry. This first page of the briefing package, it's sort of a green outline table.
Yeah.
It says private sector jobs retained, 13. So the private sector jobs through the period that reported, 13 are private sector. Obviously, you can see here that the majority are public or city.
But the bottom line is you've retained 157 city jobs.
That is correct.
That's which means that we essentially supplanted.
Well, some of these, like I said, some of these programs allow you to continue to use that.
Right. I just want to be clear that that's what we're talking about.
There's not a blanket prohibition, but
so as the total number of jobs created is 8,900 something, right?
You're talking about at the end of all, if all the money is expended?
I was looking at the other report that you did.
Yes.
The back. What did you call that report?
The dashboards.
Dashboard.
They're kind of a weekly update. Yes. Of all the projects that we've been awarded, I think it's 83 right now.
We project that we created 8,900 jobs. Can we just get a yes and no?
Yes.
Okay, it's more than 8,900, almost 9,000 jobs. Of that, we are projecting to retain 289. We've already retained 272. So for the other 8,600 jobs, are we suggesting we're only going to retain 17?
Doing new jobs.
The total retention estimates for all the projects we've been awarded thus far is that 289. So if
but we've already retained 272.
No, sir, it would be 157. 115 are new jobs created.
Oh, 157.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I see. So then we project that we're going to create 157 more, or something. Approximately 130 or something like that.
Now, but you have to also, this is an estimate based on the best estimate at the time that we made the grant application.
And the grant applications were not looking at job retention as a goal.
So
it's got, you got to admit, it's got to be a low estimate because our general managers weren't thinking of job retention at the time.
Or it's hit and miss. This actually represents what we're reporting is actually happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But my point is that I've never said that all the ARA jobs should be city jobs. What I've said is we should try to carve out as many as possible given this time. If we are projecting that with the current grants, 550 million that have been awarded, we project 9,000 jobs, and only 20% of the funding has been allocated. Theoretically, we should get 5 times more, or maybe $2 billion.
Yeah. I wish, but I can't go there with you on that.
Well, then explain the 80%. You said only 20% of the dollars
22% of the money had been given out.
Right.
Okay, actually given out.
Oh, but how much has been awarded?
As opposed to awarded, I will have to get that for you. I don't know how much has been awarded, but only 22% have been given out. We've only received 16 million.
Huh. So you think all they've awarded just...
Oh, they haven't awarded all the money. No, they haven't awarded all the money. There'll be plenty of money that will be awarded.
Do you have any idea how much remains to be awarded?
We'll get that information for you.
Yeah, because that will give us an idea. And when we talk about retained jobs, I was just curious on this one grant, the weatherization grant. You said we created 77 jobs and we retained 77 jobs.
We're going to let
Yeah, we're taking that up next.
We're taking that up and they'll explain. I think.
But you said there were 77
There's
jobs.
77 jobs. That's it.
144?
No, sir, it's 77 jobs.
How could you retain 77 and create 77?
Mr. Eloquent, I was speaking to the department before the committee meeting. When I explained that to them, there was a little misunderstanding in terms of the definition.
Okay.
It's only supposed to be 77, not 154.
Okay, so
Now,
we have to figure it out.
Exactly. The dashboard, I included the 154 in error also, so I'm going to back 77 of those out. You'll see that next week.
Now, many of the grants that we've applied for require a city match.
That is correct.
Almost all of them.
No.
Well, many of them.
Well, many of them do.
Many.
Okay. Where there's a city match, it's typically with existing workforce.
You can get a match for services in lieu, or there's actual dollars.
So we've
sometimes.
done that.
We've done both. Yes.
So, if when we're looking at potentially cutting 4,000 jobs, do you think we ought to exempt the people that are required for the match?
Well, I'm assuming the people that are required for the match would hopefully be in part funded through the match or through the grant. I mean, that they'd be off the general fund, but
many of the matched.
In other words, if we reduce our workforce by 4,000 people, and it includes some of the workforce that is intended to match this grant, it could jeopardize the grant.
Correct.
So
Yes.
So we should perhaps, maybe I'll introduce a motion that says we need to exempt those positions that, I had introduced a motion that we should exempt any position that generates revenue. This would be a revenue-generating position if it is part of the match.
Good morning. Anime Utah from the CAO. If
I can't hear you. Can you put the mic right?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Anime Utah from the CAO. We've talked to the departments regarding the city match for these ARA grants, and most of those matches are special funded. So those positions are actually not slated for any type of layoff because they're not general funded positions. They are special funded positions, either by the SEM or, Prop O. So, those positions are pretty much intact.
But they tie the general manager's hands in terms of how they move their staff around and find positions. I mean, that we have to be careful not to cut these positions. I mean, and when we look at the general funded versus special funded, we just have to be careful.
I think we agree. I think by definition these are protected positions because these are special funds that are coming in for them. So I think we can spell that out clearly. We've done that. We can reiterate it. But
so right now, but it may be a position that right now is on a general fund, but they would be funded.
That's not my understanding, but we'll hear from DWP in a second on what the ones are.
That's a DWP grant. I'm actually talking in general, addressing the general comments.
Well, like I also said, some of these grants will allow us to use our personnel as a local match. Others require actually dollars.
We
need to look at the ones where we can use.
We got to look at those positions that are currently generally funded that might have been offered as part of the matching portion, because we don't want to. If we lose those positions, then we have failed to meet our match. And then we'll have to come up with something else.
We should be able to do that, to identify on the ones that we've been awarded,
just asking.
the ones that where we've specified that there's a local
so
match.
I'm just raising everybody's attention that we have to be mindful of that as we move forward. Okay, I have a couple of questions about the specific grants, but have we sent a word out to all the general managers to try and focus in on job retention as a goal?
Yes, we have. We actually had 13 meetings with city departments this week, focusing on job retention. We've also met with, for example, street services. We've asked them for a list of positions that were funded with ARA, as well as those positions that are vacant. Okay. We actually found that there are 95 vacancies within street services, and what they're doing right now is actually matching the ones that are on their layoff list with those ARA vacant positions, and they found about 11 positions that they could move from the layoff list into the ARA vacancies.
Okay, now
so
the 16 jobs that are being created in the weatherization program, for example, are those potential city workforce transfers?
They would have to answer.
I'm going to defer to the department on it, because they're setting up a special, I think, almost like an apprenticeship program that will eventually alleviate.
I recognize that we have the specific item coming, but I'm speaking to the managers of the program, and I just want you to have that. I want you to be seeking these things as we go. I mean, because when they're writing the grant, they don't necessarily contemplate these things, and certainly in the dynamic times that we're in. But it really needs to come from you.
Yes, we have, and our goal is actually to meet with each department every month as the applications come in, as well as when they provide the ARA project health report. We meet with them every month and try to focus on the job, not just on the job itself, but also on the expenditures and reimbursement of the funds.
Okay, now, as we move forward with the potential layoff process, I really want to hone in on what exemptions we might get to retain city jobs.
Mr. Alarcon, if I could too, speaking directly to the low-income weatherization that you're going to hear in just a moment, reviewing their list of the 77 employees, I did see where there are some classifications. I think management analyst or management assistant secretary, even though DWP has classifications that are rather unique to DWP in many instances, and the majority of those, I believe, are such. However, there are some what I call, general city classifications that are proposed to be in that. And they can speak to that. I also have that handout that they provided I could give you. as well.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to the to 1A then, and we'll hear about the weatherization program. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Joe Avila, Staff Assistant to the General Manager of the Department of Water and Power. I'm here with the team who is responsible for the weatherization project. It's led by Tom Gackstetter, and he will provide you with some of the details. But I did want to address one very astute comment made by Mr. Ellercon. With regard to our overall job creation activities, Mr. Freeman has made it abundantly clear that our focus has to be like a laser beam on job creation. It's been the mantra from the beginning, but he's re-emphasized it every day, including last night. Every project that we've looked at, we've tried to optimize the number of jobs created from every project, and right now we're actually coordinating not just on the ERA projects, but holistically throughout the department, and our Director of Human Resources is actually working with the city family to reconcile any job opportunities, be they ERA or non-ERA, and trying to match up any positions relative to positions that are up for layoff. So I just wanted to make that clear. So Tom, with that, Tom Gackstetter, the head of our weatherization project. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
With me I have Lucia Alvarez, who's our residential programs manager, and Nelson Liu, who's our project management and control engineer, power engineering manager. To repeat a little bit of what Jim described to you this morning, funding is being provided through CSD at the state level. It's $9.2 million in grant funds. The purpose of this funding is to provide weatherization services, weatherization measures to both single and multifamily dwellings for low-income customers to reduce their energy bills and make their homes more efficient. Another equally important purpose for this project is really to develop the process and capacity to implement a larger scale program that you sort of referred to as our Green Ambassadors program, or General Manager refers to as the Green Doctors program. So this is really an opportunity to road test the mechanism. The number of homes to be weatherized is about 3,000 homes over a 20-month period beginning in August 2010 with a completion date of March 2012. I would add that the areas in which we're going, which are primarily focused in the San Fernando Valley, are dictated by the zip codes that were given to us by the Community Services and Development Department. So we have been directed to the areas in which to work. The criteria for receipt of weatherization services for this grant must be an eligible low-income customer with a high energy burden. And what we will do in order to identify those customers is to analyze their energy use data for the prior 12 months to rank and prioritize the customers that would be targeted for this service. As has been mentioned, 77 jobs will be created as a result of this project, and I apologize for the confusion on the retained versus created. This is jobs created. 16 positions will be administrative/technical, and this is a great opportunity to look at the match between city employees that are affected with the current financial situation and our needs relative to these 16 positions. 45 utility pre-craft trainee positions will be employed, and these will be folks right off the street given job skills, trained through department facility or department capacities, as well as through the LACC mechanism. And they will be working right alongside journeyman labor to implement the services. And that journeyman labor will be comprised of 16 building repairers, and those folks will be hired out of the Union Hall, and to the extent that the city has building repairers that are available to us, we can certainly utilize them in that capacity. As far as crews go, there are approximately 10 crews out on the job at any one time, comprising a three-person crew with a supervisor, and on average we expect to weatherize one home per crew per day. And this is a very important job skills training opportunity for those folks that we're bringing in the pre-craft trainee position. Again, the deadline for completion is March 31st, 2012. And as you might imagine, the benefits to the city, certainly an improved quality of life for those customers who receive these services. Their energy use will be reduced as a result, allowing them to expend their money on important needs such as food, rent, medication, things like that. And again, it's an opportunity to bring stimulus funding to Los Angeles.
Okay. The balance of the $12.5 million overall cost is the department will be using its own funds for 3.3 million?
That's correct.
Okay. And the districts that are specified, walk me through, do we have to do it in one area? Is that why it's just in the San Fernando Valley versus other parts of the city?
Right. As was mentioned, CSD has 44 service providers, and several of them pulled back from this funding. So their territories, if you will, are the ones that we're targeting with this funding.
Because those were the only ones where service providers were still available?
Those are the ones where the service providers are not going to step up and provide those services. So
where they're not? Okay.
We're filling the void.
So the service providers are doing the other areas of town. This is the one that we're doing directly?
That's correct.
And does that also cover districts 6 and 7 in the valley? I saw the council districts. 11 was listed here, which is West LA. I don't know if that was a typo or...
The districts that we've identified by virtue of the zip codes that were provided to us are districts 2, 3, 4, 5, 11, 12, 13, and 14, and some portions of each.
Okay. It's a little bit different than the grant proposal sheet, and that's a combination of this one and the other ones that will be done by service providers?
Those are the zip codes that were provided to us for this particular project.
Okay. A couple of those are not San Fernando Valley at all, so I'm just...
Understood. That's...
Okay.
It's focused...
So it's partially San Fernando Valley, but not exclusively. Okay.
Right.
All right, colleagues?
Yeah, there were a couple of districts that weren't listed on your grant application. Yeah. You mentioned, I think you said 13, 14, and 15?
They're missing out. Oh. We'll make that revision, sir. It's a good catch. I noticed that.
And why was the 7th council district not included?
These zip codes were provided to us. This is the areas in which we're being directed to work with this money.
By who?
By the Community Services and Development Department.
That is who?
That's a state agency, and the reason for that is because there are other service providers working in the other zip codes.
Okay, so the 7th council district has a weatherization program?
I'm sorry?
You're saying the 7th council district already has a weatherization program?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my question too, but...
No.
Maybe we could, maybe the CEO could...
We may want to check on that.
The mayor's office, maybe?
We may want to check on that, Councilmember. These areas were being abandoned by another group. So there was a void created, and they filled it with the Department of Water and Power. So all of these districts were, they were asked us to fill the void.
But I was under the impression the service provider in my district
so we need to check to see if there's another service provider. You're exactly right. There may be another service provider other than the Department of Water and Power who was already designated to provide service in that area.
No, they were, but I thought they went under.
Yeah, we have to check on that, sir. That's what we're saying.
I think, so you don't get 15 identical questions, we need to see how the city is being dealt with on weatherization and who those providers are on the districts that are not on this document, so that we get a citywide view.
We'll definitely do that.
The other thing I was going to ask is that we say this program is $12 million, but we're going to get a $9 million grant. Where does the gap come from?
Yes, 9.2, and the other, I guess it's about $3 million is coming out of our power revenue funds, sir.
So that's coming out of DWP?
Yeah. I know it's designated as a city funds, but it's actually power revenue funds, water and power.
And this is still one of those reimbursements, you do the work and have to put it in?
Yes, I believe this is a reimbursement, and what we're actually trying to do, and we're working with the CAO on this, is the concern that we have is the same one that was expressed by this committee, insofar as for those grants that are reimbursed, we have to wait 3 years to get the money back, so we're actually trying to work with the DOE and the various agencies to figure out if there's a way in which we could get a progress payment type of compensation and not have to wait till the end, maybe on an annual basis, ideally a quarterly basis, so we can collect some of the money sooner.
Mr. President, when is this coming to council? Because I think those questions about the citywide weatherization should be answered before it hits the...
This is the... Sorry? It's community enhancement. Not even for the acceptance of the money? For the acceptance of the money, this is the plan for the application, or this is the acceptance of the money?
No, application is on the 26th, sir.
Okay. So it would be after it's awarded, if it's awarded.
Because I was just wondering, when do we get the feedback on who are the service providers for the district?
Let's ask for that next week.
I know who the service provider is. It's Community Enhancement Services, but they provide services to the entire San Fernando Valley without any special consideration. So I don't see why the 7th council district should be excluded when we have the highest rate of poverty.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question, sir.
I said, Community Enhancement Services provides the weatherization service to my district, but they provide it to the entire San Fernando Valley. So I don't understand why the 7th Council District is excluded from this grant, particularly since we have the highest rate of poverty.
Right. We'll have to check on that, but each of
the highest number of foreclosures.
Right. Each of the grants, as you probably know, have very specific criteria. This one has criteria that designates the money for these particular council districts. We'll find out if there's any latitude to provide service outside of the criteria that we know of. So,
thank you. And my staff will be happy to work with you on
absolutely. Thank you.
Overjoyed. All right. With that, we'll go ahead and move this forward. Thank you, gentlemen, very much, and lady, for your good work on this. Arnold Sachs is our one public comment card for this meeting.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Arnold Sachs. I unfortunately got here a little late, but I was listening to part of the discussion regarding special funded positions that are paid through fundings other than the city's general fund. So my question is, although these positions may be subsidized with outside funding and not use the general funds, who covers the pension costs for these positions? Because that seems to be a bone of contention in any budget discussions. And if the pension costs exceed the amount of money that is being paid for the position, then actually it becomes a drain on the city's general funds. So that being said, who also covers the health care costs that these positions, the people in these positions need to have covered? Are those also covered by outside funds, or does that money come from the general fund? The number of city positions that would fall under special funding, the number in the proprietary department, any way to find out that number? The number in the city, and the number of city and police and firemen that are funded through special funded positions. Because if you're just adding funds, if you're just adding positions because they're special funded and you don't want to touch them, and you're getting paid X amount of dollars, but you have to come up with Y amount of dollars to cover the costs of the retirement and the benefits, and the Y amount of dollars exceeds the X amount of dollars, then the city is getting drained for what? Unfortunately, they need to be considered also. If they're just revenue generating positions, and you're not and that including revenue generating above and beyond the cost of the pensions and the retirement, that's a different situation. But we haven't heard any of that discussion. It's phony baloney, just like the numbers you may have spoken about 4,000 layoffs, but nobody's been laid off yet. And so this number appeases people who are looking at headline making, but it doesn't reflect the reality of the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. That will close our general public comment for this committee meeting. Until next week, we are adjourned for the Ad Hoc Committee on Economic Recovery and Reinvestment, and we'll begin the City Council meeting shortly. Thank you all.